Welcome into the doors of psychic experience and star people. Thank you for tuning in. Ask and you will be given what you asked for. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. For everyone who asks receives. Anyone who seeks finds. If only you will knock, the door will open, and the truth within your higher self will be revealed to you. Come with us now and go with us where angels come, and so can you.
Welcome to our show, Psychic Experience of Star People, presented by the First Spiritualist Church in the City Heights area of San Diego, 1 block south of University Avenue, where angels come and so can you. This is show number 121. I am Reverend Doris Horvath, the co-producer and host for the show. And I'd like to tell you that the contents of this show are metaphysical, spiritual, and educational. If you are looking for a different church that's unusual in its vibrations, the First Spiritualist Church may be your answer. We have very different approach to religion. We believe in life after death and continuation and communication with spirit after death. Our church is also a healing and teaching church. Every Sunday morning we have our aura healing, and we have spirit, music, and interesting, enlightening lectures, followed by spiritual psychic readings. In the afternoon there's more. We have delicious lunches, workshops, and classes. And sometimes we have movies and healing. And more of all this, and it may be what you're looking for, you just didn't know where to go. So this is what our show is all about. We have various different gifted guests that come on and talk with me. We also, if you have children, we have a First Sunday Lyceum that starts around 10:45 and goes to 12:15. So feel blessed that you can bring your children with you, but only on the first Sunday of the month. Now, my guest today is a very interesting man who is actually the co-director of MUFON Society, and I want to tell you a little bit about him because he has a lot to tell us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit here. He is coming from his experience with the USAF, 4 years as a radar operator, the 685th ACWRON, Las Cruces, New Mexico, has a bachelor's associate equity in San Diego State Mexican history, Spanish Aztec culture, 29 years, San Diego County Public Works, 26 years study of ancient Kemet Egyptology and the history of their culture, religion, politics of the 18th through the 19th dynasties. Translation of hieroglyphics and hieratic language in depth. Court cases, letters, religious writings, books of the dead, special reports. He teaches a small hieratic class, and Kemet is studied every day. Discovered a highly singular event. He wrote Journey of the Demons, which is now in a library of Griffith Institute, Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, United Kingdom. This is the subject of the show tonight, which I know you're going to find to be very, very interesting. So I'd like him to say hello to you right now. He's sitting here right next to me. He's ready to go.
Well, I'm very glad to be here.
Well, we're very fortunate that you are here with us tonight because we had Ed on our show a few years ago, and this is sort of a continuation because it's hard to say everything in 22 minutes. So I'm going to be asking Ed some questions so that he can communicate to you and the audience exactly what he's all about and what he's doing and what he has to tell you. So the first question I have for you, what is Kemet?
Well, Kemet is the actual real name of the country we know as Egypt. When it was in decline, the name was changed to Egypt, and I won't go into too much details about why it was, but prior to that, for thousands of years, it was known as Kemet. The base word chem we use in chemistry, alchemy, it means dark. Ta means land. So Kemeta means actually the dark land, and they're referring to the rich farmland along the Nile River. And initially it was near the Mediterranean, and then the country extended into the south and into the desert regions. But that name always stuck. It was called Kemet, and that is the correct name. Also, the change, all of the gods and goddesses and many things were altered by the presence of the Greeks and other people. So the original names were changed in all of the gods. As an example, you have Isis was actually Aset. Every female had a T at the end of the word. So it wasn't Cleopatra, it was Cleopatra. It was the cat goddess here on the table, that's Bast. She got away with it. They didn't change her name. But so many of the gods were changed. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, was originally Anupu. They put the S on it, it became Anupus. So what I try to do is I'm trying to preserve this and try to make people aware of the fact that that was the original name and the original names of the gods and all the cities, and give them a second look at this, because as it is now, it's rather, it's not correct.
How do the scribes function?
Well, it's an interesting thing about the scribes. I thought it was so important to bring it up because from about age 6 on to 15, they were, it was a very difficult training. They had to learn all about the religious aspects, everything. They just had a crash course in it. And by the time they were about 15 years old, they were full adults. They'd be the equivalent of a person today, maybe 25 years old. They were working for the government when they were 15. They were working for the temples. Of all the writings they did, I can count the times I've ever seen an error. So these people were good. I'd equate them to some of our really outstanding young people on computers today. It's about the same field. The ones that if they could weather the training, they had a lifetime, job. So it was quite interesting. They recorded everything. I mean, we're talking court cases, we're talking religious works, we're talking anything that happened. They recorded tax revenues, every single thing we have today and plus more. They recorded. I mean, there was no end to what they recorded.
What interaction was there between religion and Pharaoh?
Okay. Kemet had thousands of gods, but the way they looked at life was that they believed in God, a supreme being that was responsible for everything. However, they had a corporation out of it. What they did was, instead of saying, well, I'm going to ask God for help, they figured, well, he's too far away, he's too busy, he's not going to give me any time because it's just too impossible. So they had lesser gods. They had things called pauts. A paut is a company of gods. They'd have underneath God, they'd have lesser gods, small g if you want to call it, and under them would be other pauts. And so, for instance, the equation is if you wanted to buy a new car, you wouldn't go to the president of the company and say, I want to buy a new car. You'd go to the local dealer. So if you needed help with your life, instead of asking God for help, supreme God, you'd go to a local equivalent God and ask for help. And so the interaction between Pharaoh and their religion was this. There was a lifelong, century-long, thousands-of-year-long relationship between a certain family of gods that the people really enjoyed this. That was Isis, Horus, and Osiris. That's their Greek names. But then through their history, they had this other god called Amun-Ra, and that was a temple in the new part of Kemet, in the south. It was more or less financed by the government. They had a tremendous amount of the equivalent of money going into the temple. And the people didn't much buy into the Amun-Ra thing. It was a composite god. They still liked the old family of gods with Isis, Horus, and so forth. So there was kind of a strange situation. So you had one family group that was getting no financing, and this other group that was getting extreme amounts of money. They owned cities in other countries. This temple did. The side of the temple was 1.5 miles long on one side. That was in the new capital of Wast. So Pharaoh, you can imagine, here's something that's, quite powerful. The Pharaoh and the high priest of Amun-Ra were kind of looking at each other, trying to decide who was the most powerful. So that's what was going on in that angle.
Well, describe then what happened with this New Year's celebration that was so different and interesting.
Yeah, the New Year's celebration is what this is all about. What they did was, the New Year's celebration happened on the 20th of July. And the reason we know it happened on the 20th of July, because that's when the star that we know as Sirius appeared in the sky. And what was so important about that, they called it Sept. When this star appeared, the Nile flooded. So naturally, they looked for the star because it would kick off the flooding season, and it was exactly at the same time that would happen. And as that would happen, they would have this huge celebration, and they'd also have a party that would last about 1.5 months. So they also did this, of course. There would be 700,000 people coming to the capital to celebrate this event. And they would have a thing at night called a Isis watch or Osset watch. Her name was Osset. And this is a hieratic form of what it says. And it says, Ger and Secher Osset Resut. And that means night in passing of the Osset watch. And the reason they did that was they equated Osset with the star, Sirius, or Set. It was her star. And so when she appeared, so to speak, the Nile would flood and the party would kick off and they'd have a lot of fun. So it wasn't totally a religious deal. Pharaoh was there, and also the high priest of Amun-Ra was involved in this. And they would have this elaborate ceremony. The next day they'd have the boat of Pharaoh and the boat of Amun-Ra with this 4-foot solid gold statue of Amun-Ra on board. And they'd go from Karnak to Luxor back and forth. And the people would be cheering. And oh, by the way, there was free beer. There was all kind of free food for the masses.
Okay.
So provided by the temple of Amun-Ra. This is all very interesting. So that's why everyone went to this festival, because you could either stay home and swap mosquitoes and look at the Nile flooding, or you could go to this wonderful, great party with all this free food and all this activity going on. So that's what that was about.
I had a vision. I was involved with that big party in a past lifetime. It started out in a temple of healing that I was involved with a group of healers. And we went afterwards. It was a full moon celebration. The next morning we got in these big ships and we went up the Nile River to this huge place, this huge temple, and they had parties that lasted all day. And some of it was healing too.
Yeah, well, that's you have a very good description of it, because it's exactly what was going on. We know that they had at least 700,000 people, because then later when the Greeks were recording this, they had these massive amounts of people that would go to these festivals. And we know for a fact that there was an extreme amount of people in those things. Like I said, it was unemployment, so because they provided food for them. So that's another reason that they came also, until the Nile finally, it stopped flooding and they'd go back to work.
Well then, what did you discover and about how unusual was this whole situation?
I went on a crash course about studying the language, and I came across this this thing here. It's a bit of a straka. What they did was the scribes did not write on papyrus. It's just too expensive to manufacture, so to speak. So they would use bits of limestone, slices of limestone. Roughly, they weren't 8.5 by 11, but they were rather irregular. But at times they approached that, size, and they would write everything on these bits of what they call a straka, pieces of smoothed off limestone. Now these guys, remember, they were about 15 years old. They're writing this down with probably at night sometimes, with a little oil lamp, and doing excellent writing, and so they're rather young doing this. They've got good eyesight. I think about that, consider that. Well, anyway, I came across this strange thing here, And it's, according to the book that it was in, they were talking about it, they said it's an invocation to a demon. Well, it really wasn't an invocation to a demon. It didn't know what it was. This thing appeared. Apparently what happened was, right at the time of the star Sirius appearing, or Seb appearing, this thing appeared. And what it did was, it came out. You can see the front line of it. I've got it here, so you can read it a little bit better. I can tell you what it says. The front line is just a bunch of squiggly lines of some people, but it says everything. It says Anechrake Sahagag Percept. What that translates to is, hail to thee, Sahagag. Sahagag means super disruptor. Then it says, Per, coming forth from the star Sept, this Isis, the whole deal. It's her symbol, that is to say. Her symbol is a snake. It's a goddess in the sky. And it's the only one that is Aset. Okay? So that's what it's all about. And the problem was that he didn't know what it was. He just did not know what this thing was. And he was overwhelmed by it. And Egyptologists, you know, they didn't know what to make of this thing, so they more or less thought it was some type of just an invocation to a demon, which it was not. But that is so singular. And I tried everything else to try to figure what it was, and you know, we're going to be a meteor. But it mentions eyes, your eyes, you know, behold your eyes. Well, that's two lights, and this goddess bossed in the table has two eyes. It equated it to a lion. It equated it to something in the sky that was like an animal form, and it was moving around the place. And it said, we don't have time to go in all what it was saying. But it was discussing it as it was something very fearful. They didn't know what it was. They totally did not know what this thing was. And it happened to appear at this date. We know the date, the 20th of July. The most amazing thing is it says so, coming forth from Sept, it says. Well, that only happens when the star Sirius appears, and that's only the 20th of July. So we know the date, approximately 1203 BC. That is at the time of Seti II.
Now, how do Egyptologists view this report?
Well, I've been fighting with them.
Oh.
First of all, I'm not going to badmouth the Egyptologists. These people are responsible for all this wonderful information. But in this particular case, they're viewing it as a common garden variety demon, so to speak, that they would, they'd have these problems with their body, or they'd have a headaches or something, and they'd blame this on a demon. So they'd have kind of an exorcism. They'd make up a little bit of papyrus and put these words on it, and they'd wear it around their neck, and they'd say, protect you from the demon. So they found one of these papyrus things that was similar to this, and they said, oh, that's what it is. It's something to do with a headache or something. No, this thing specifically says mysteries in the southern skies, and it says you are fear, and they didn't know what it was. So it spells out exactly where it appeared. It says it's coming forth at this particular time. We know the hour that it appeared, because the star Sept appears right before when the sun comes up. It's right above the sun. It says it's like a jewel in its crown. And so we know that it appeared about 2:30 in the morning. That's the time of the jackal. That is the hour just before dawn. So.
What are your plans to help discover this happening?
Well, the plan I'm trying to do is to get people to recognize that this was an extremely unique situation. This was not, they have all kind of things written on demons. I've read them all. I've looked at a lot of them. I've read people that they lumped one of this particular event in a book with some other demons and so forth. It doesn't fit. It's just too unique, because it spells out exactly that it's coming out of the sky. The little talismans that they were selling, or more or less giving out or selling to the people because they were getting scared of this thing, says coming forth from the sky and the earth. Well, that kind of, you know, is all inclusive. so that's great for if you're gonna ward against a demon of some kind. But this thing particularly describes it in this event, in this time frame. We know that it was coming from the star, appearing at the same time from the star. We know that we know that it was causing fear. It was an unknown thing. It was in the sky. We know it had to be fairly low. The report goes into much more detail on this. We will not have time to cover that tonight.
Well, then why is the date so important?
Okay, this is the surprise I was telling the crew about. This date, 20th of July, keep this in mind. The 19th is when, that's the night before, but the 20th in the early morning hours of July. Here's what happened. Let's zoom ahead to 1952, summer of 1952, Washington, D.C., July 1952. At the National Airport, Reagan National Airport, we now have UFOs appearing in at midnight. They picked up about 7 or 8 UFOs around the Capitol. Okay, this particular day of the month of July 1952. There was at the ARTC unit, that is to say the unit that has to do with the National Airport, and the tower radar people were picking it up. There was Navy intelligence in the room, there was some Air Force officers, and they finally decided to call for a scramble or an intercept from the nearest air base. The nearest one was Andrews Air Force Base, but they were paving the runway, so they had to go to Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware. It took a half hour to get there. By the time they arrived, by the time they got the pilots out of the sack and put them in on board the plane, it was 15 minutes. It was 15 minutes from launch to the target area, so it's a half hour. When they called for the intercepts, the UFOs disappeared. They're talking about 13 UFOs. They disappeared. The planes flew around. There were F-94Cs. They were our first all-weather fighter. It was a 26th Air Defense Command, the first year in 1952 of having it. And the planes we had, the all-weather fighter that we had, that is to say with onboard radar, we needed them desperately because we were afraid the Soviets would come in with bombers and hit our atomic facilities. They had a thing called a Tupolev 4 Bear bomber. It was the equivalent of our B-29. We ran tests to see if they could penetrate our defenses. Prior to the F-94 all-weather fighters, we had Sabre jets, but they were day fighters. So if the Soviets had come in, they could come in at night, they could bomb everything, and they'd be in a suicide mission. We couldn't stop them. So we wanted these planes, we wanted these all-weather fighters out there as quick as possible. But they were on loan to the 26th Air Defense Command. They were so new, and some of them were at Newcastle. So that thing happened. The following weekend, oh, by the way, they scrambled it. They scrambled two jets, two F-94 A's and B's. The following weekend, the 27th, they were back. The UFOs were back. Same thing, midnight to about 2:30 in the morning. So they scrambled them again. Well, the people are beginning to watch this on the, around Washington, D.C. They were above the Capitol dome. So they had a press conference the following day. By the way, by the time the F-94s arrived, the UFOs had disappeared. And after the F-94s went back to Newcastle, they appeared again. So the people wanted an answer, so they brought the press out, and they had a Air Force officer who said, well, that was a temperature inversion, had to do with car headlights and stuff like that, which it does not appear on radar. I was a radar operator, so I know it has to be a solid object. And the people in the ARTC unit, at the National Airport, they said, that's not weather. They said, that no way is that weather. They said, those are solid objects. Now here's the clincher. The date it appeared at 2:30 in the morning in Washington, D.C. was the 20th of July, the same date it appeared in the ancient city of Was, the capital, 3,200 years ago. The same date and the same hour.
Wow, that's too much of a coincidence. Why is this virtually unknown then?
Well, which facet? Did you want to, if you talk about the thing in Kemet, it's getting out there. I'm working with certain people to get this information out, and I have no idea what this has to do with anything other than the fact that it's as I said, a highly singular event. There's a strange, what do you call it, coincidence between the two dates. I have no idea what the significance of it is, other than it happened. You can call it coincidence, you can call it synchronicity, I don't know. But here you have two very famous countries, United States and ancient Kemet. Kemet was back in the center of the world. They had a similar situation, world outlook that we have. A lot going on back then. You have a situation where you have this thing appearing above the Capitol with many, many witnesses. You rocket ahead to 1952, right above in our capital, this thing appears, the major country like that. It's just so strange.
It's got to be true because it's so strange. Well, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate your being with us tonight. Now, if you would like to get some more information real quick here, get a paper, a pencil, whatever you have, write down the church's phone number at the end of the show. With that, you can call the church, leave a message, and they'll get in contact with me, and I'll make sure that you get a phone number if you would like to talk to Ed some more about this. So that's how it would be done. Remember the church where angels come and so can you, any Sunday. And we want to thank you very much for watching. And we want to say God bless you. And we're very, very happy that we have people like Ed that come on and teach us what we need to know about, because there's too many people that don't want us to know.
That's about
And
right.
I want to know. Goodbye for now, and God bless you.